Chapter 10 Sticky Notes. So the case study in Chapter 10 is about transgenic maize in southern Mexico. So transgenic means genetically modified, and maize is corn. So from this case study, it's a very famous case study. We have genetically modified corn found in isolated farms in Mexico, and so this means the wind blew in the pollen from genetically modified plants all the way down to these isolated little valleys in Mexico. And so this is a problem for farmers who want to keep their genetic distinctiveness and different varieties of corn. And also, you can't be organic if you are genetically modified. So farmers who want to be organic, and it costs a lot of money to get organic certified, they don't like it when their pollen is contaminated by genetically modified crops at a neighboring farm. All right, go ahead and turn the page to 246. So in 246, you need to know about the Green Revolution. And after World War II, we had a bunch of extra nitrogen left over from making bombs for the war, and we turned that into synthetic fertilizer. It wasn't just that, it was also mechanization of farms. So we have tractors now and other farm machinery that not everybody had before World War II. And what this did was increased the agricultural products tremendously. So we've had a population boom in the world, but our food supply has been able to keep up due to the Green Revolution. So the Green Revolution has nothing to do with being eco-friendly. It has to do with growing more crops, which are green for photosynthesis. So that's what we mean by when we say the Green Revolution. So before this, we didn't use a ton of fossil fuels for growing crops, but we do now. Synthetic fertilizer is man-made nitrogen through the Haber-Bosch process. Before this, people got fertilization from natural sources like manure and compost. Synthetic pesticides, so these are made out of chemicals, and this did not occur before this time. And then we also have the technology for sprinklers and irrigation, which we did not have before the Green Revolution. So mechanization of farming means mechanical, tractors, machines. It's not just tractors, it's also machines that harvest or spray pesticides or fertilizers. So mechanization of farming increases profits, it increases efficiency of crops, but it also increases the use of fossil fuels. So some pluses and minuses for the Green Revolution. On the AP test, you have to know positives and negatives for a lot of things. So some of the positives is that it saved some countries like India from massive starvation. It has reduced overall poverty in the world and the United States. So we did not need to put new land into farming. So that means some of our land was saved for wildlife. So in other words, in parts of the western United States, we can keep those forests as forests because we can grow enough food to feed ourselves from the current land. So we increased productivity on the farms tremendously, sometimes by 10. So if we used to grow maybe 10 bushels of corn per acre, now we can grow 100 bushels of corn per acre. That's a huge increase. But the negatives from the Green Revolution is a huge amount of water pollution from fertilizers and pesticides. These are not the same thing, remember. They do different kinds of things in water. Fertilizers cause eutrophication. Pesticides are toxic to aquatic life. Can be, not all of them. So we've also had a loss of biodiversity of crops. So we grow less types of crops and less genetic diversity in those crops as well. Our livestock is now less nutritious than it used to be because of the lack of variety of livestock. So we used to have maybe 100 different types of dairy cows, and now we're down to maybe 10 types of dairy cows. And so we've lost genetic diversity. We've increased air pollution from farming too. So tractors and other machinery produce air pollution. And then nitrates, so when you spray fertilizer, which sometimes we call crop dusting, we can spray fertilizer or pesticides from a plane, or even from machines we spray them. And from fertilizer, we have nitrates in fertilizer that can become airborne. So that is one way that we can get nitrates in the air. Turn to page 248. So the original Green Revolution had those things. It also increased monoculture. Monoculture is growing thousands of acres of the same crop, which is efficient. So up here the picture says that monocultures improve efficiency of planting. So you can, efficiency means more profits. But it has drawbacks too. Loss of genetic diversity, outbreaks of pests. So if they're all the same genetic, you're not going to have any resistance to certain types of bad bugs that eat your plants. Okay, and then recently in the past 20 years, we have had another green revolution, so the modern green revolution. And in this one, we have genetically modified crops. So these didn't come originally. These are really only about in the past 20 years have we had genetically modified crops. And these crops can be tastier, higher yields. Yields is the amount per acre of food. We've bred them to be drought resistant and pest resistant. Another thing that has come about is food irradiation, where we radiate food to kill pathogens like in our meat. On this page, know the definition of biofuels. Biofuels are fuels that are made from living sources, so like corn makes ethanol. But a problem with biofuels, it has caused the price of food to increase, because if you're going to take the corn and turn it into fuel for your car to drive on ethanol, then we have less corn for food, and so now there's competition for that corn. And in a capitalistic society, the more competition there is for a resource, that's why the prices are higher. That's why diamonds cost so much, because they're rare, and so the price goes up because of its rarity. On the next page, it starts to talk about the impact of eating meat. So we have a lot to write here. So it's going to go down here, then to here, and then up to here. So eating meat affects the environment more because of trophic level loss. You lose 90% of the energy in the plants as they're fed to the animals. I was wrong. Actually, it goes over here next. So therefore, we need 10 times more land, pesticides on that land to grow those crops, fertilizers, 10 times the amount of fertilizers and fossil fuels to grow the same amount of calories of meat versus just if we ate the plants. So in other words, let's say we grow a field of wheat. If humans just ate that wheat directly, we get that full amount of calories from that wheat. But if we take that wheat and we fed it to cattle or pigs, then as soon as it goes into their bodies, 90% of it is lost as heat, and only 10% gets stuck to their bodies as delicious meat. So we've lost as heat 90% of that wheat calories. So we could feed the world much more easily with less fossil fuels, less pesticides, less fertilizers if we ate less meat. Another problem with meat industry is that it pollutes the air with methane, nitric oxide, and then CO2 for climate change. All of these three can cause climate change. Down here, know this figure and caption. So these are the environmental impacts of different types of meat. beef versus porks versus eggs, not a meat, but it's an animal product. Chicken and then milk is an animal product. And so for beef, it's actually more than 90%. If you put 20 kilograms of food in, 95% of it's lost, and only 1 kilogram gets stuck to the cow as beef to eat. So this is an actual worse conversion. So that's why they say that eating beef is harder for the environment. Whereas it's a little bit better to eat pork and eggs, and then chicken is not very much of an energy loss actually from the food to the chicken. So that is definitely much less than a 90% loss. It's maybe only a 30% loss. Up here it talks about your picture here, so know this figure in caption. So it's not just energy loss, it's the amount of land required to produce a kilogram of protein. So beef requires much more land. And here we have water that's required for a kilogram of protein. So land use, water use also for beef. All right, so beef has something called a CAFO, Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation. You need to know the problems of this, which is a lot of problems. The positives are really economic, so it's reduced the price of beef for poor people. So that's one of the benefits of this, but there's really a huge amount of health problems for humans and environmental problems from these concentrated animal feed operations. And you can see a picture down here. Sometimes they're called factory farms or feedlots. So factory farms, feedlots. The real name for this, again, is CAFO, and so you need to know that. So here's a benefit as well. And so we have problems, we have benefits, and you can see that also down here in the pictures. Because they're so crowded, you're going to have diseases that are spread more quickly through the animals. They're going to have to give them more medicines, more vaccines, more antibiotics, which actually ends up in their meat. So then we eat all of those medicines that they're giving to them because they're so crowded. Going on, continuing with animal agriculture. Some organisms are mainly domesticated now. So basically bees, yes, I know that they seem wild, but most of our bees are European honeybees, and we have so many of them that are in hives. So our European honeybees, not our wild bees, because we have wild bees too that are different species, but our European honeybees are mainly completely domesticated. Cattle used to be wild, it's pretty much not anymore. Pigs, yeah, there's some wild pigs here and there, but most of our pigs are domesticated on farms or feedlots. Chicken. So these animals were once originally wild, but a long time ago they were domesticated, and that has reduced their genetic diversity. Because we only breed the types that we want to breed together. Another thing with animal agriculture that you need to know, it produces air pollution with the smell too. So we have smell pollution. If you ever live near a CAFO or you've driven up the 5 freeway towards Sacramento, you drive past Harris Ranch and it smells. We also have nitrous oxide air pollution. These are our greenhouse gases again from animal agriculture. It pollutes our surface and groundwater with nitrogen and phosphates, with bacteria and viruses. Because they're crowded, we have the overuse of antibiotic, and because of that, we now have antibiotic-resistant bacterial strains that affect human health. It reduces the topsoil because animals tend to compact the topsoil and prevent plants, or they eat up all the plants that would hold the topsoil in place. We'll continue on with the next video.